But first, I want to thank Judy very much for joining us, because we've been looking forward to hearing your presentation and to conversing with you. And we all know that September is Women in Medicine Month. So that's what kind of prompted this little get together, that we have a Zoom social to honor the female physicians. I was very surprised when I asked Elka today. I said, exactly how many female physicians do we have now in the HCMA? We have over 870.
That is remarkable.
You know, that is such a significant increase over the years that we're just really, really proud of it. But I would just like to take a minute to recognize and honor all of you for your valuable contributions to the profession of medicine. Thank you for your efforts and your perseverance as you faced all the many challenges with the pandemic for almost 2 years now. And I'd like to raise a toast to all women physicians in our county, our state, our nation, for your wisdom, your kindness, your extraordinary dedication to medicine and to your patients. Thank you.
Yes, indeed.
Cheers. Cheers. You're here. Cheers.
And as the only lay person here, I really congratulate you all because we need you. We're very grateful.
Yeah, things have come a long way. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
So we have a special gift, and we're trying to think, instead of something boring like here's a basket with names and I'm going to pull one, we're going to do something we did at Dr. Silverfield's house for his installation when we gave away something. Since September is Women in Medicine Month, I need to ask how many of you have a birthday in September?
Oh, Pamela Baines.
That's it? Okay. Oh my gosh, I thought there would be a lot of hands raised, and then we were going to narrow it down to the closest to today. Well, Pam, you will be receiving a $100 gift card to Straz.
Oh, that's nice.
Wow.
Oh, that's
Very nice.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Yay, Pam.
Congratulations.
Wow.
But you'll have to wear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can save it and use it for a special time, but yeah, it's worth it. I wear my mask
All the time.
Well, it is my pleasure to introduce Judith Lisi. As we all know, she's president and CEO since 1992 of David A. Straz Jr. Center for the Performing Arts. Judy has previously served as the executive director of the prestigious Schubert Performing Arts Center in New Haven, Connecticut. In 1995, she founded Opera Tampa and has produced nearly 50 full-scale productions and presented concerts by many of the great opera luminaries. In 2004, she founded the Straz Center's Patel Conservatory, which offers professional training and education in the performing arts. Judy has served on the executive committee of the Broadway League for more than 30 years and was the founding chair of its first education committee. In addition to a multitude of other honors and awards, in 2012, she received the Broadway League Distinguished Lifetime Service Award for her outstanding leadership. Judy holds a BA from Sacred Heart University, an MA in Theater and Communication Arts from St. Louis University. She pursued a doctoral coursework in theater at the University of Minnesota and studied opera at the Juilliard School of Music and with the Metropolitan Opera. I'm very impressed. I welcome you and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this. I was supposed to meet with you another time, and I had a conflict. So this is so nice and small and intimate. I feel like I'm a member of your group. So thank you very much. Interestingly, when I started the opera company in New Haven, I had so many doctors from Yale that were interested in classical music and opera. And I have always found that it seems to be a real affinity in medicine and music. So that's terrific. I know I have a half hour. I don't know which direction you'd like me to talk about, whether you'd like me to talk about the Performing Arts Center in general and our programs there, or the arts in general and arts and Tampa and how we still have a long way to go, or about women in the arts. There's so many different things. And Patricia said, oh, they don't care. They said, talk about anything, but I want to make
Gonna
sure.
leave it up to the ladies, and I
I need
will
your
let our
recommendations,
physician members chime in.
Yeah.
If I may suggest, I'd be interested indeed in your experience as a woman leader in the world of arts, and for us to compare that as how it feels in medicine. But I also would love to see your vision for arts in Tampa Bay. I think it's also a very nice topic.
Okay. Well, I'll talk a little bit about the first one. I think our field, the arts, is probably not different from most other fields where we had women as artists. I started actually as a performing artist, but women in leadership or running large institutions or in any kind, or in producing or anything that required where the decisions happened. I'm 74, I'll be 75 in October. There were no women in that area. And when I first started as an artist, I would look out and I realized I was more interested. I love performing, don't get me wrong, it was great. But I got more interested in how we could do it all better. And I realized I that's where I wanted to go. So then I started directing, and then I became an artistic director, and then I started managing smaller theaters, then larger theaters. And then of course our theater here, which you probably know is one of the largest performing arts centers in the country. It's the third largest on the East Coast after Lincoln Center and Kennedy Center. Our performing arts center is the third one. But I'll never forget, I would show up at meetings and there were all men and maybe one or two women. And I have to say, it was terribly intimidating that I wouldn't say anything for like the first few meetings or whatever. And then finally I would get up the nerve to say something, But now, and I started a number of organizations on the Broadway level, at the Broadway League, and conferences. Now there are so many women in leadership in the field. It's unbelievable. And that's in like 30 and 40 years. So it really has gone in a very good direction. And I think it's helped. Our big effort now, of course, is with diversity, because we have very few people of color in leadership positions. So that's, I think, the next big effort. And we have a major diversity and an inclusion and equity program at the Performing Arts Center. And we also are part of a large network called the Performing Arts Center Consortium, where we're developing fellowships to help people of color and the BIPOC community become leadership professionals. And we'll have our first person next year coming on board for that. So we're making headway, but it's so interesting from my perspective when there were no women and now seeing so many women. And I think hopefully we will get there with the rest of the people in this country. So performing arts centers will look like the rest of America, which is really important.
I'm thinking, I thought that the Met just hired their first African-American director. Did I read that right? In 138 years. I mean, that's pretty impressive. And I think that's so important what you're doing to add diversity. We just have to do more of that.
Yeah, it's really true. As a matter of fact, there's a big movement even in Broadway to diversify what Broadway shows look like, so that there's more shows where you can see people of color on stage, or their stories, or playwrights. And I think that's going in the right direction as well. I mean, we're such a rich country when you think of it. The tapestry is and fabric is so rich, and there's so many great stories to tell. And that's what the arts are. You know, the arts tell us about who we are. And so we've told part of the story, but we haven't told the whole story. So we have a long way to go. But interestingly, even with our Opera Tampa, we have so many singers who are singing the regular repertory, but they're not people of color singing. So, and you don't notice. I know when we first cast some people, and they didn't look like the people in the roles. And a few of our audience people would call and say, well, why did you do that? They don't look like that character. And that's what we have to get beyond. And really, once you're into it, you don't notice it anymore. But it's that kind of jarring thing in the beginning, but we'll get there. At any rate, I think I'll talk a little bit about the Performing Arts Center in general. And I think many of you, well, some of you might have been here when it first started, but this was a huge effort for the city of Tampa to build the Performing Arts Center. And it was first incorporated in 1981 and officially opened in 1987. And it was not easy. It was not an easy project. These people who worked on this, they gave their heart and soul to it. And because people here in Tampa had not been exposed to the arts, they just didn't know. And so they had to create the vision of what a place like this could be and how it could help transform Tampa. And so, and when you think about this now, it's the money is not that much, but they raised the most money ever in Tampa for this project. They raised about $30 million, and then the city matched it with another $30 million. So it was a $60 million project. And that was there were 3 theaters at the time. If they were to do that today, this would be like a $700 or $750 million project. It was the largest performing arts center in Florida. It still is. But to give you an idea, they opened the one in Miami about 10 years ago, and that was 500 million. And they opened one in Orlando, the Phillips, 5 years ago, and that was 600 million. So ours, which is bigger, we have 5 theaters and the conservatory, it would be, well, probably $700 or $750 million. So Tampa really got, I think that I always say that you really got a bargain. I say that because after 35 years, we're going back to the city because we have an expansion plan. And so I'm hoping that they'll help us with it. I think they will. But think of me October 14th, because they're supposed to pass this on October 14th. But at any rate, we do have 5 theaters. And we're the home of the Florida Orchestra, which I think many of you might attend. And they're really a wonderful orchestra for this size community. And of course, we have Opera Tampa now. Our main programming and most attended, of course, is Broadway. And we have one of the largest Broadway subscriptions in the country, which is why we're able to get the major shows that we get. And we get them first, because obviously producers only want to bring their shows to where they know they're going to have a large attendance. And we have a great attendance. Our community really, really supports it very, very well. And I will tell you, this last year was hard, not just for our Performing Arts Center, but it shut down the arts across the world. And we're just now beginning to come back. Broadway, you might have heard or read, is starting to come back now. And we have 4 or 5 shows have opened on in Broadway now. And by the end of the year, I would say about 12 will be open. 3 shows, the large shows, have opened on what we call on the road, which is us. But it's the big ones like Hamilton and Lion King and Wicked have opened successfully. But what we're all dealing with now are these health protocols, especially backstage, because we had to work with all the arts unions like Actors Equity, the Musicians Union, the stagehands, to develop these protocols because these people are traveling and performing. And you know, when you think about the performing arts, when they perform, when they sing, they spit, you know, and when they dance, they're sweating, and you know, they're sharing a lot of molecules here. When you know all about that, you're the scientist. But we had to work very, very hard to develop protocols that would work. And they're very, very strict. Right now, we have a required vaccine mandate at the Performing Arts Center because they're only going to venues where they have vaccine mandates. That I was happy about that, actually, because it meant I could ask my whole staff to be vaccinated because my business depended on it rather than any political thing or craziness or anything. So that worked out great for us. But we're now 99% vaccinated at the Performing Arts Center. But in addition to that, performers all have to be tested 3 times a week still, in addition to vaccination, because of the breakthroughs now, and because the nature of the work that they do. They're right in each other's face. That's the only way we can perform. You'll be interested to know we did have performances last year. We have an outdoor theater called the Riverwalk Stage. I don't know if any of you have seen anything there, but our singers sang with masks, and our opera singers sang with masks, and our dancers danced with masks. Imagine trying to breathe and dance and sing at the same time. But we did it successfully. And, you know, we had a couple of COVID cases. Also, our conservatory has been open the whole time. Just in March, when we had to originally shut down, they went virtual for about 2 months until July, but then they have been open all the way through. They did hybrid for a while, and now they've been open all the way through. And everyone has followed the health protocols, so that's worked out great. Anyway, let me get back. Here's our new brochure. Curtain up. Where's the camera? Here it is. You will have to come and see our shows. I can't show you every page, but go on our website, straz.org, and you really get a good sense, I think, of the breadth of our programs. They're enormous. And we, as I said, in addition to Broadway and opera and orchestra, we have a fantastic dance program that we do. We have a program that we do with National Geographic. I don't know if any of you have ever attended those lectures, but it's the photojournalists and essayists that write for the National Geographic, and they're so interesting. And after the show, they'll do a meet and greet with everyone. That's been very successful. We have a program in our one of our smaller theaters called Club J, which is a lot of emerging artists, singer-songwriters that come. And this is on a Monday night. It was the only dark night we had there. And if you've been in the J, it's set up like in a cabaret format, and people really enjoy that. And this year, in our effort for diversity, we had singer-songwriters, but now we're making sure we represent people of a lot of who have come from a lot of different backgrounds as well. We have a program on the Riverwalk stage called Arts Legacy Remix, and we try to represent the many different nationalities and people who make up Tampa, because we're very fortunate in Tampa. It's a very rich community. And this month it's all Spanish, of course, because it's Latin Heritage Month. And I have to say, we have a lot of comedians. They're the easiest to do because it's one person comes on, and they make us a lot of money. So we really love our comedians. They're just great. We open our first Broadway show. We were supposed to open with a show called Hadestown. I don't know if any of you have heard about it, but Hadestown won the Tony the last time we had a Tony Awards. And it's a terrific show. But it's based on Orpheus and Eurydice. And, it's very dark because they go into hell and everything. It's a terrific show, but dark. So then they decided to postpone it. And now we're opening with Tootsie. And I'm so glad because Tootsie is so funny. And I thought, you know what? We really need a happy show to start the season to get everybody together. So that show opens October 25th. And then our series will take off.
Judith, how expensive is it to bring a Broadway show like Tootsie or Lion King? I mean, it must be a big expenditure.
It is huge, and that is a great question. How the deals are structured normally is, let's take a show like Tootsie, which is kind of an average show. It's not a big blockbuster like a Hamilton but it's what we call one of our good show, but and not super expensive. But to give you an example, they'll say, well, the guarantee for that show is $500,000 for the week, right? So then if you look at, so we are in contract, we have to assure that they will get $500,000. But then on top of that, we have all of the local costs. We have the marketing costs. We have the stagehand costs. We have all the costs of running the theater, all the employees in front of the house, all of everything, all the insurance, everything associated with it. And then after that, we go into what we call a split point. And usually the producers get the lion's share. So they'll get the 70% of the rest and we'll get the 30%. But it's okay. It works because then we have our whole food and beverage activity and all the ancillaries that support it all. But the reason why we've been successful is because we've developed such a strong subscription program. Because when you have subscription, people have subscribed to all of your shows. So what does that mean? That means we have that money up front that we could get. Well, you don't get any interest on anything right now, but if we did, when we used to get interest, it was good. Plus, you don't have to advertise from $1 every time you bring in a show. Maybe you already have 60% of your tickets are already sold. So then, so you're going to make that guarantee. That's really what makes it all work. And that's why subscription is so important. And I'm happy to say, I'm stunned by this. We have more subscribers now than we did in 1920, which was our last big subscription year, and 25% new subscribers, which is like, how did this happen? So I'm just so thrilled about that, So, but that was a great question. Do any of you come to any of our shows, or do you? Yeah. Oh, good. What do you all? I see Martine. I know you like classical music. What do you come and see?
So I typically have had many years the season tickets. Well, I dropped them last year because I've been so busy at work, but I certainly intend to go back. I kept supporting the Florida Orchestra anyway, because no orchestra survives without banners. But so, for the other shows, I go from time to the opera, Broadway from time to time with friends. Depends on the type of friends I have with me. Some prefer Broadway, some prefer opera.
Good. That's great. And the difference, for example, between opera and Broadway is the operas we produce ourselves, and that means we select what the opera is going to be. We cast it. We decide what we're going to do about the sets, who's going to direct it, who's going to choreograph it, the lighting designers. We really build it from the bottom up, because opera doesn't tour. Opera used to tour years ago, about 35 years ago. The Met would tour maybe a few cities. And then it was too expensive because opera is actually bigger than Broadway. If you put together an opera chorus, which is about 40 or 50 people, and then the orchestra, which is about 40 or 50 people, and then huge sets of opera, it's just you can't carry, it's too expensive to carry from place to place. So I always say opera is like Broadway on steroids. It's and Broadway sometimes has the look of being big, but in terms of actual humans, their opera's just bigger. I always say opera's queen of the art forms because it has everything. It usually has a huge orchestra, as I said, chorus, and very often has a ballet that is part of it. So it's just big, but I thought it was so important when you have this incredible performing arts center. And Morsani Hall, which you see behind me, when they built it like an opera house. It's in a classic U shape, like you see in opera, a horseshoe. We call that a horseshoe shape. And the acoustics we had probably the best acoustician in the world did the acoustics for our performing arts center. And he actually became world famous because this was his first big project 35 years ago. And then he got selected for all the major concert halls in the world. He just recently died a couple of years ago. But the acoustics here, next time you go into the hall, you'll see this big cloud chamber. I don't know if you ever noticed this big wooden thing. Everything in the room can be adjusted for the acoustics. There's these spaces, these rectangles. When you go in, like around here, you'll see these rectangles. They can be open and shut. There's curtains that could be drawn or brought in if you need to soften the sound or you need a harder sound. It's so sophisticated. It's really tremendous. Okay, I go on. Give me some questions because I'm like.
Well, I have one I had put in the chat is I read once that when they created the Performing Arts Center, there was an extra hall that was planned. That was a symphonic hall with a symphonic organ in it.
Yes.
And since you have expansion plans, I was curious, are you planning that kind of hall?
Well, actually, I'll talk a little bit about the plan. I wasn't here when they designed this center, but you're right. Originally, they were going to have a separate orchestra hall. And but it was already expensive, so they decided rather than to do that, they would develop this hall, which was what we call a multi-purpose hall. And so what this hall can do, if you've ever seen the symphony here, it turns into a symphony hall because the pit comes up and there's this incredible teak wooden curtain that comes down and the whole thing turns into a symphony hall. So that's the workaround they did rather than have a separate symphony hall and this hall. But now we do have this, our second hall is the Ferguson Hall, which is also a beautiful hall. And that's 1,000 seats. This hall here, Morsani Hall, is 2,600 seats. And the Morsani Hall is 1,000 seats. But it would be fun someday to have your group come to the center for one of your get-togethers, and we could have a little reception, and I could take you on a tour of all of our 5 theaters, and you can see the conservatory there too, if you're ever interested in doing something like that, because I could demonstrate it much better, if you were there. Now, our master plan, it's going to be very exciting because the way our center was designed, which, and it was at the tail end of that architectural movement called brutalism, very hard kind of planes. And I'll never forget when the first time I came in here to meet the folks here, the board, there was no signage on the building, and it looked like a fortress. It was just this big concrete building, because the way you approach the center, as you know, is from the rear. You don't approach it. If you see it from the other side of the river, it looks absolutely magnificent. but nobody really approaches it that way. And there was no signage on it. So I drove right past it. But I saw what we call a fly house, you know, the big, so I said, oh, that must be it over there. So I went in and I met this is the search committee, and I had a great conversation with them. And I said, whether you hire me or not, I said, I'm just going to say, you really need to put a sign on the building. I said, that's really important. So when they did hire me, like within 6 months, I had put the first big neon sign on the performing arts thing. And all it said was the Performing Arts Center. I said, this might be the shortest job I ever had. I don't know. But at any rate, you know, as I said, you approach it from the rear, kind of like, it was, I don't know why they wanted the front on the river, which is great in concept. And we had the first river walk 35 years ago, but there was no other river walk. That was it. It began and ended on our property. And so, but now with this fabulous river walk, we really need to be part of it. And that the thrust of our plan is going to be opening all of our lobbies from Carol Morisani Hall and the Ferguson right out to the rivers. It's going to be fabulous. And the other thing we want to do is right now, to get inside any of the lobbies, you need a ticket. And, you know, if you've been to other performing arts centers, you can go into the lobbies, but without a ticket and enjoy it as you do a museum or something. And then if you're going to a particular show, you surrender your ticket when you go into the theater itself. So our whole idea is we want to open it to everyone. And we're going to have a lot more free performances on the river as we're doing now. We're going to use more of our local artists. We have some wonderful artists here. And so it's really going to be, I think, a tremendous community outreach is what it's going to be. Like our board chair, we're going from inward looking to outward reaching. And I really think it's going to be beautiful. So plus then the only new building we're adding is a multi-purpose building, because when they built performing arts centers 35 years ago, they didn't think of hospitality, which is kind of crazy when you think of it. Because we bring in almost 1 million people a year. Well, what do people have to do before and after a show? They have to eat and drink. And we have so many people who want to do other events there, whether it's special events like a bar mitzvah or a wedding or a big anniversary party, or businesses that want to do a conference there or whatever. We have some calls for that, but we don't have a space for it. So this one new building, it will help us with all of those things that we haven't been able to do for the community. So we're really excited about that as well. So I don't have the plan today, but if you do come over, then I can show you the plan as well.
I think it's a great idea because, you know, I'm from Switzerland. I'm from Geneva originally. So we used to go to the concert and then go to the restaurant after concert, you know. And
Exactly.
last time I arrived in Tampa, the only place you could go after a concert was the bar of the Holiday Inn next to the
Yeah.
Well, and you know, what we did do is we have a small restaurant we call Maestro's right now.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, that's a converted rehearsal hall. We had to convert that into a rehearsal hall. And then we have some food and beverage in the lobby, but we had to shoehorn that in. So now it's going to be it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be a beautiful place to be. And, you know, that's a community needs that. They need something that's aesthetically uplifting, whether they go into a show or not. So much of community building is about placemaking and having a place that is beautiful for people in our communities. So no matter what you're going through in life, if you could be around something beautiful, it just lifts you up. that's what it is, you know.
Judy, when will the building be complete, be finished?
Well, if we get this 25 million, which is what we're hoping to get, we have our 2 co-chairs for the private campaign are Chuck Sykes of the Sykes Corporation, and Dr. Kiran Patel, and they had named the conservatory after Dr. Pallavi Patel, who should be here. I mean, she should be on our little group here because she's a, anyway, so there are 2 co-chairs. So the city owns the building, and it was very important that we get the public commitment so that we can leverage the private sector. And that's how they raised the money for the original building. It was the city's commitment first, and then the private sector had to match it. And this is going to be the same, in theory, the same thing, that we'll raise 50 million, and the whole project with endowment, I put in 20 million for endowment, which you always have to do responsibly. And we're hoping to have 50 in public and then 50 in private. That's what we're working toward. And the problem was with COVID, we had just started the campaign in February. And in March, we had to stop. And honestly, for a while there, we didn't know if we were going to come out of this at all. It was such a dark tunnel for so long. So fingers crossed, if we can get through this Delta and get more people vaccinated, we'll get through this. But we're feeling really good about this now.
That's a wonderful thing for the community. And I've been with the HCMA, and so has Elka, for decades. And so in the past, I remember several times that the Medical Association would have an event. What we would do is purchase the entire Jade Theater, but we would go upstairs to I think it's Maestro's.
Yes.
And we would be the only group up there. We'd have a reception and hors d'oeuvres, and then we would go downstairs and watch. I think the very first show was Hairspray at the Jade Theater, you know, something fun. But we had to purchase the entire theater, and at that time we had to put a limit on it because we were concerned that we would get more reservations than you had seats. And we even had a couple Christmas events there. In your restaurant. So, and one time I remember we partnered with the University of South Florida and had a very nice event there. So I'm excited about the new building because that's something that, you know, we could even take advantage of on a lesser scale, you know, because budget's an issue, but it's something we can offer our members for something different and get together, and that's exciting.
Yeah, and now we actually turn away a lot of business because we just don't have the space. Because, you know, because our food and beverage manager, he works so hard, he's so terrific, and he'll say, gee, I can do this wonderful group, I can make all this money, but I need the lobby. We can only do it in the lobbies, and once it gets to a certain size. And I said, yeah, but we have to use that because we're a performing arts center. We have to use it for the theater. But so there is a lot of opportunity. And, you know, when you're a not-for-profit, it's so important that we think entrepreneurially how we're going to support what we do. So this will help that too. This will bring in new revenue that we could put toward all the mission-driven things that we do there. So it's going to be great.
Judy, are there plans for increased parking?
That is a great question. And we're working with the city to find solutions for that. You know, the city is growing. What happened was when the Performing Arts Center opened in 1987, the Poe Garage, which is, you know, the garage that's near us, that was supposed to be for us. So they said they didn't need to build a garage to support it. Well, look what happened. Everything else has grown around it. And guess what? It's still one garage trying to support everything. Now, with that said, if you've noticed, if you've been in that area, there's a tremendous amount of construction that is going on. And fortunately, there is parking with all of those new buildings that are going up. So we will have parking in the evening that will be available. We won't control it, but all the new apartment buildings that are being built will have parking associated with it that can be used by our patrons. So it should be much better than it was. And there's been plans since 2012 to build a 36-story building right in front of us. I don't know if you've heard about that. And so I went to the city and said, we're going to need new signage because you won't even be able to see us with all the buildings that are around us. So I'm hoping they'll help us with that.
I just want to comment on a historical note. I remember when you were hired, because my husband, Bob Humphreys, was on the
I
search
know.
committee.
I was going to say, I know you, Barbara.
Yes, yeah. And there was
good
such
to see you.
excitement when you came, and I think people don't realize the struggles that the Performing Arts Center actually had before you arrived. There was some dark days there. It started out very strong in '81, and everybody was so excited about all the contributions and the philanthropy, which Tampa had never had. But then it went through a period when there was a lot of questions about the viability, and I think it's a credit to you and your leadership over the last 35 years, because that was a real turnaround. So I remember.
Well, let's toast to that. Huh? Let's toast to Judy.
Oh, thank you. And to J. Bob, he was like my partner for so long. He was so tremendous. We have a conference room named after him. And every time I walk through that door, I think of him and all the wonderful things he did for us. He
really loved that Performing Arts Center. And one of the things that I thought was interesting historically is that they separated the contract with the architect and with the acoustiician. Normally, apparently, the acoustics is wrapped into the architectural contract. And so, an architect is primarily interested in the aesthetics, but not necessarily in the function. And the separation of those two apparently was very fundamental in terms of how that particular hall turned out, from what I understand. So, and
very innovative, because sometimes you sacrifice the architect will sacrifice the acoustics.
Right.
And in this case, they couldn't because they were two different contracts. So it was brilliant.
I remember they made a trip to San Francisco because San Francisco had the architect do the acoustics, and they had to retrofit that whole building to a very big cost after it was built. And so after they came back from San Francisco and looked at theirs, they decided that they needed to separate those two contracts, which was really probably saved a lot of money and created a much better hall. So an interesting historical note.
Very common mistake. The same thing with Avery Fisher Hall at Lincoln Center. They've retrofitted that twice and they still have not been able to get it right. Acoustics are kind of this art science, and we're so lucky that we had this great acoustician. And the wonderful thing about our master plan is they did such a great job on the design of all the theaters. We don't have to touch them. They still work like a charm. They're beautiful. And over the years, we put $20 million of upgrades to keep them state of the art, because you've got to keep them where they need to be. You can't let them run down. So we have all new lighting and new sound systems, and so all of that's there. We have a new roof. We new bathrooms. I don't know if you saw, we put all of that there. So the building itself, so the money we're raising now is all additive. It's all just going to make the whole experience so much better. So we don't have to retrofit anything. We don't have to make backstages bigger. We don't have to do all that big work that a lot of places have to do, because the theaters really all still work beautifully. So we're fortunate with that. It's just going to be better. Everything's going to be more beautiful.
That's great. Well, thanks to you.
Thank you much. Well, Barbara, I figured when I came down here, because that was the second theater I turned around, and I thought, when I came here, they said they called it the White Elephant Tampa Bay Performing Arts Center.
Right.
So I said, well, the first thing we have to do is we have to get rid of that white elephant and get it back to what it's supposed to be, the Tampa Bay Performing Arts Center. but really, it didn't take a lot. It was the programming mix and marketing, putting a sign on the building, you know. It didn't take a brain scientist to figure that out.
I think the programming changes that you initiated were really fundamental too.
Yeah.
They
Well,
changed a lot of the trajectory.
They weren't doing, I mean, Broadway was my background, and they weren't doing the best Broadway. They were doing some bus and truck tours. You know, I said, they have this incredible, beautiful performing arts center, and they were doing inferior work. You can't do that. Your expectations when they go in there are very high. You have to meet those expectations. So that's what we did. Yeah. So anyway, I see it's 8 o'clock, 8:04. And
Does anyone have any questions before we sign off for Judy?
I have an extra question if you want.
Yes,
You are connected with all the art milieu in Tampa Bay, obviously. And where do you see things growing, and how do you see things growing in Tampa Bay art-wise?
well, I'm so glad you said Tampa Bay, because we have to look at Tampa Bay, not just Tampa. I tried a few years ago to, you know, the problem is we have, you know, St. Petersburg, and we have Tampa, and we have Clearwater, and even Sarasota. That really makes up all Tampa Bay. If you look at all the major arts organizations in Tampa Bay, there's probably more than almost anywhere other than maybe New York and Chicago. If you look at that as a whole, but we're small city, but we're all small cities. So what I tried to go to the Tampa Bay Partnership. I said, you know, we need to market all of the arts here as a destination for the arts. And that's always a challenge we've had here in Tampa and St. Pete. It's like everybody's like, well, we're this and we're this. I said, no. People out there don't know that. They just know they're coming to a place. So we have to make it easy for people to access all of these things. And I still think that can be done. If we could just get these communities to talk to each other and be less competitive and more collaborative, you know, in terms of how we market this whole area, because we have a lot of great arts here. And I think most of them still, and funding is always an issue with the arts, and how to, for example, in Denver, they have this penny for the arts where there's consistent funding. We don't have that here. Everybody's always struggling, you know, to get going. But the good news is the orchestra right now is very stable, so that's really good. And they play in the 3 communities, which is good too. Instead of having like 3 orchestras, at least it's one orchestra that uses that resource very cleverly. We just have to learn how to do our resources. The great thing about how we do opera is because we produce it, we don't have to have a separate opera company. Because if you had a separate opera company, then you have all that administration and all of that. No, when we were able to do it ourselves. And so the money we raise for the opera, we put it on stage. You really see really high quality work, because we raise the money so we could really get great singers and great sets and everything and put them on stage and not use it for overhead. It's how we use our resources, I think. I don't know if that helps answer your question. And our conservatory is doing great. It's growing in leaps and bounds. Part of the master plan is we're expanding the conservatory because it's been so successful. And now we have performing arts centers from around the country coming to look at it and do it. The Kennedy Center, I just opened theirs, like ours is 17 years old. They're just starting to develop one there right now. And, you know, I wanted it on campus because when I was at Juilliard, if you know Lincoln Center, Juilliard is right across the street from Lincoln Center, and you can access a lot of master classes and whatever. And there's something aspirational when you're a student studying, well, like your doctors, you know, being in a hospital and seeing what happens. That's really important. So I really wanted it on campus, and our board was great. They said, yeah, we'll do that, but we're expanding that as well.
Well, Judy, I can't thank you enough for your time, for joining us this evening, and for all that wonderful information. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
And I'm sure that we will see you again in the future. We'll plan a HCMA event, going forward. And so thank you again on behalf of all of us. Thank you. And
thanks, Judy.
Thank you so much to the HCMA members.
Your girls are all grown up and everything, huh?
They are. I have one that's a lawyer here in town, one that's an OBGYN in Philadelphia, and one that's marketing in Miami. So everybody's out and about ready to get married. So we're going to have weddings this year.
Good. Happen at the Performing Arts Center.
Or next year, actually. Next year.
Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you, Judy.